This is ContactTalkRadio.com, consciousness in action, and you are taking action into your consciousness by tuning into Contact Talk Radio.
And on TuneIn.com, Hing.fm, and UpSnap Mobile.
Contact Talk Radio. Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Joan and Janet are subtle energy empaths who navigate consciousness. Their passion is to support you in your evolution. As consciousness, we are all one. One mind, one heart, free of all limitations. Experience this reality with us and discover how it can make a difference in your daily living. Join us in a state of grace as we explore, with warmth and humor, this thing we call life. Now, here are Joan Newcomb and Janet Barrett.
Welcome to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. We're your co-host, Joan Newcomb, coming to you from Tacoma, Washington, and my partner's coming to you from Portland, Oregon.
Hi, I'm Janet Barrett, everybody. Nice to talk to you this morning. And it is beautiful out here, so good job.
We have a very interesting show for you today. We're talking about consciousness and clear communication. We're going to be talking about being able to connect easily with oneself and also with another person. There are different mediums, different technologies, different languages, and states of intention can create conflict in sharing and understanding. So stay tuned at how we explore, because we are going to be exploring how communing as consciousness gives us better communication.
Lots of things going on there on the airways and communicating. So here's an invitation for you to go deeper with us, to contact us and connect with us beyond the show at our website, www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com. And there you're going to find out all kinds of good things that Joan and I participate in. And you're going to find all the podcasts from all our past shows there. We talk about our blog. We post both our blogs there. Those are full of good information. And Joan's going to give you all the details here about all the stuff we do.
That's right. So our website, www.consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com, is where you can listen to all our podcasts. You can read our blogs. You can find out when our meetups are. Janet does hers in Portland on Tuesday night and Thursday afternoon in her lovely home in Portland near Reed College. And then I do them around the Puget Sound in Seattle, Bellevue, Tacoma, and University Place. I'll have a couple of announcements of meetups coming up in just a second. For those of you who want to find us on Facebook, the show is on Facebook, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And Janet's on Facebook, Janet Barrett. And I'm on Facebook, Joan Newcomb. So you can join us there and join the crowd and join the fun, is what I say. The show is on Twitter at Joan and Janet. Janet is on Twitter at Janet Beyond. And I'm on Twitter at Joan Newcomb. And then the show is on YouTube, Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, just in case you didn't hear the title of the show enough. And then also I'm on YouTube, but I post my weekly YouTube videos on our website. So if you're going to our website, you will see them brand spanking new every week there in Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. Now, if you are in the Puget Sound area and want to meet me in person, want to communicate about consciousness, if you like the topics we're talking about, come see me this weekend in Redmond on October 29th, Sunday, October 29th, from 2 to 4 p.m. I'm doing a consciousness master class. So this goes deeper than just conversations. This will actually teach several techniques for navigating your life as consciousness through the very interesting turbulent times we're in. And it is going to be at the Family Pancake House in Redmond. They have a meeting room in the back, and it's $10. And maybe get some pancakes while you're there. The following week, Sunday, November 5th, I'm going to be in Seattle from 2 to 4 o'clock at the Cafe Appassionato in Magnolia. And I'm going to be having a conscious coffee in their meeting room in the back there, and that's also $10. Conscious coffees are going deeper in conversations than the library conversations we've been having. The library ones are for new folks coming in, and so we repeat the same information over and over again. But if you really want to get into juicy, deep topics, visit us for a Conscious Coffee in Seattle. And then in Tacoma on November 12th, I'm going to be doing a Conscious Coffee there. And I do those at the Bostwick Tully's downtown. I think that's about like 7th or 9th and Broadway, in that old building downtown. They have a really fun little meeting room upstairs. And that too is $10 at the coffee shops.
And also on our website, you'll find out information about how Joan and I both offer sessions, and we do it with clients singularly or with groups. And you can find out all the information there if you like the idea of working one-on-one with each of us. And Joan, you've got a new opening in your 12 Weeks to Transformation coming up, you said.
That's correct. I have a private coaching program, which is 12 Weeks to Transformation. It is holding space for you over a period of 12 weeks to completely transform your life. You get personal private coaching with me, so you can focus specifically on the areas that you want to work on. And I also have training to learn specific consciousness techniques to skillfully navigate your life and instantaneously create transformation. So if you want to know more about that, go to my website, which is joan-newcomb.com, and look at my coaching programs.
Lots of things to communicate, lots of ways to be, and that fits into where our subject is today, which was kind of interesting in our idea of what we wanted to talk about today, and reading what we're noticing, what we're tracking out there, and how to be clear, what's possible in all this uproar and reorganization that we're all feeling. Is how do we communicate? How do we share and express with ourselves at heart, but also with those around us, and what that's all about. So we should have fun today.
Yes, I made a comment about how all conflict comes from miscommunication, and that's not necessarily the correct, but I would say that all conflict comes from misalignment.
Yeah. I think sometimes people are very clear in their communication, and that people respond to that, definitely different ways.
Well, and there's an imbalance somewhere. There's an imbalance somewhere if there's conflict.
Right. Well, agendas we're not always, I think we can be quite clear in articulating our agenda, and it just depends upon whether the other person is simpatico with it or is in conflict with it. Do you think?
Yeah, what I find is that when I am operating as consciousness, so another way to say it is if you're aligned as consciousness, you're in this state of tremendous clarity and neutrality, non-resistance. And so someone could have a different opinion, someone could have a different point of view, someone could be out of alignment where you're in alignment. And it doesn't affect you or bother you, that you don't experience conflict and you don't contribute to the conflict because you're in this state of ultimate neutrality, is what I'd say.
Well, and I think there's also places and ways to go with that. I think is why we say that everything starts with us, and that when you can experience your own communication in a way that's useful, because it depends on how you got that set up. It's like following your gut feeling. How easy is it for anybody to do that? And everybody's different about that. And that's a communication from one part of your being communicating to the mind, perhaps. And you go with it, or you go against it, or it takes a long time for that information to get there. But in being able to access that freely and easily is what's key. And then what you do with the information, that's an act of mind. But in being able to hear it clearly, and that's kind of what we're talking about, is you can be very clear. And then how the other person responds to that, either you've got it set up that that's going to be a challenge, or that's going to be, yes, I get that. Okay, and this is how I meet that. So there's lots of different ways to interact with information.
There was a phrase you used back there, and I was unfamiliar with it. It was something about that's an act of mind. Could you define that in the next 30 seconds before we go to break?
Active mind. Well, I think there's a difference between what I think about something and what the information is saying. My interpretation of my own interpretation of my own information is an active mind to me, right? It's like, okay, that's that human interpreting, because everything's about bias for humans. So you just go, all right, there's information and I'm getting it really strong. How often do we listen to that gut feeling? How often does that gut feeling have to get really strong before you pay attention? Or how is it that you just have, oh, got it, go on, and I'm in alignment. My thinking is in alignment with that. And that's kind of what I mean. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. I have more to say about that, but we need to take a quick break. So you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet. And stay tuned because we will be talking about consciousness and clear communication when we come right back.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you're dealing with? Janet Barrett is a subtle energy empath. Feeling the energies present in your myths and language, she offers a supportive, non-judgmental viewpoint. Experience new ways to relate to and release the energies in those stories. Receive a $25 discount on your first session. Email Janet for an appointment at janetb@janetandbeyond.com. Come explore with Janet. New possibilities for a joy-filled life.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet, and we are talking about consciousness and clear communication.
And in that theme, everybody just check in, take a moment to notice, because what we're looking for you to be able to tag and experience with us is heart-centered awareness, which is where we're coming from as consciousness. And just notice in your own communication system, if you can tag that. And when we say tag, it means just go, oh, right, I recognize that. And all that we present on this show is about what comes out of that place within ourselves. And so I can't think of a better subject to be clear about communicating is being open to it. And if you don't experience it right off the bat, that's fine. Just allow it to be there and go about your day. And this will show up for you. So what do we want to notice about communicating with ourselves, Joan?
Well, let me see. There's several different things. There's communicating with ourselves as well as communicating with others. And then there's communicating as consciousness.
Uh-huh.
So I think I'll start there because most of us, our perspective is coming from our body and our personality. Mm-hmm. And when we think about communicating with consciousness, we're communicating with like an entity outside of ourselves, a supreme being, God.
Yeah.
You know, the focus goes outside of the essence of who we are. And when you shift your perspective to that you are that consciousness, then it's you as consciousness communicating with your body. It's you as consciousness communicating with the rest of the world. And it's a really huge shift.
It is, and that's what this is an opportunity about in what we're noticing in the energies around us is how to hear yourself first. And then what you feel inspired to do comes from that place. Because when we motivate ourselves, that's often coming from outside influences. And so we want to be moved because we want to be moved because that's us, as opposed to feeling we have to do something or be a certain way. So in that communicating with ourselves as consciousness, it's just us in an alignment where our thinking and that set of mind comes out of that set place that we are consciousness. And then in that clear experience, all this upheaval that we're noticing, all this unseen, unspoken, intangible, unrecognizable, but something's there, is finding, it comes to the surface, it has a feeling that it's coming out. And that it maybe is coming out. It's something that hasn't been articulated yet in ourselves. So that communication line and lines, we were talking about that yesterday. I became aware of when we establish a line of communication, that feels more of a human sense that doesn't feel as conscious, because consciousness is global and information is just present and you go to your clear cognizant place with it. So when you establish a line of communication, that's you and something over there. That's that relationship base. And so we're playing in different levels here all the time. So.
I got lost in some of the soup here of different communications and different points being made. One of the things I'm noticing is how important it is to start with consciousness first, and to start within first, and to shift that perspective to yourself as consciousness. And one of the things that I notice when I do that is that physical discomfort disappears. It's a pretty amazing thing. And also how I interact with the world and how I feel about the world changes as well. So it automatically disintegrates conflict, which is something we talked about earlier. When there's an imbalance or whatever, there's conflict, it automatically disintegrates conflict, at least emanating from me. And what I'm noticing also as I'm aware of that is that it doesn't disintegrate discomfort in other people. It doesn't disintegrate conflict going on in other people's lives, but it gives me a clear space to participate from.
Does it have to be I notice you use the word conflict.
Yeah.
And that seems to have a charge to me. Can it be something else, or does it have to be conflict in the way we think of conflict? Or does that what it feels like? It feels like that when maybe that's what that would be useful if that was not held that way. That could be an underlying resentment to our information, right? Is that it's going to challenge us to go someplace or to be different or whatever. And a lot of times we don't want to. We are in a place where we're just perfectly fine shooting ourselves in the foot.
Right. Well, so for instance, like when you're talking about that perspective, that's not you operating as consciousness, that's you operating as your body and your personality. Mm-hmm. So the example you gave was somebody not shifted or coming from the perspective of consciousness, but coming from their personality, their slides, their resentments, the shooting yourself in the foot. All of that's a body personality perspective. That's not the clarity that you experience as consciousness.
Right. And so we do process, we do experience information on all these different levels and ways, and it's just, that's part of the communication process. You know, we use the word process, and we can mean a couple of different ways with that. And so communication is instantaneous. It's what you do with it that creates a sense of process, creates a sense of the conflict. It's, you know, because that's the human dealing with that information. Because as far as I'm concerned, consciousness for me doesn't really care. It's not attached in those things. It doesn't hold judgments about the information. It just says, oh, here it is, and you get to do what you want with it, and you'll do what you want with it based on your biases and how you're choosing to have your soul dance, you know, and what you're experiencing. So it's like, okay, if all the information is there, how much am I allowing myself to access it? And that is from that perspective of the body and mind. And so if we just agree that the information is there, and do we want to pay attention to it now or never? You know, I mean, in all the different degrees you can do with that information.
What I notice is you describe, you know, consciousness doesn't really care. Consciousness is neutral. Consciousness is, and how I would shift that is when I am operating as consciousness, I feel neutral. I feel amused by things. I feel detached. I feel clear. I feel compassionate. I feel in love with my creation. So it's something that's coming from within me and coming as me. I am consciousness. I'm not channeling something else. I'm not responding to something else. I'm not reaching to something else outside. But this is, I start as consciousness. And then when I communicate with other people, I can come from that clear awareness.
I think a lot of this is about how we have set up communication within ourselves. Because if I notice the energy present, it's really about realignment that I'm sensing. Is that we are who we are only to the degree of who we think we are, and we are all much more than what we think we are. So there's all this, I don't know, kind of like a maze. Kind of like, it's very entertaining in the maze, but still a maze is just part of the whole for me. And so it's about letting myself be free to notice, letting myself be free to communicate. I think like everything, communication is already there. And to me, communication is how you connect and what you're willing to connect to, and what degree you enjoy that relationship to information, and whether it's coming from a person or it's coming from yourself. I think it's all in our rules we set up about how we're going to experience the world. Interesting.
Yeah.
And I think and I'm not judging any of that, Joan, because we are the sum result of everything that was before. And on the level that we hold and interact with that, it organizes itself. And the challenge is that we tend to get very focused, and localized. And it's really, consciousness is about the big picture to me. And then you have the specificity. I have always trouble with
Specificity. Yes. Yeah. That word. Right.
and you come in and out of that, right? And it's not one or the other. It's just how you're operating on all those different levels at the same time. That to me is clear communication. That to me is the place to be, because I am in my physical experience, but I got here because from within myself, I'm tagged as consciousness within. So this body is an expression of that consciousness. And, it's an invitation to open up. That's what communication is. And we make it finite, or we allow it to be bigger. And this is just this invitation to our listeners and to those that are going to come after us and before us, and because there's no time or space of consciousness, to receive, to send, to open, to unfold. And what happens when you do that?
Yes, I'll agree with you there. And you were talking about communication being so much more than just verbal communication, because we're sending out energetic imprints as well. And so communication happens, it's like, look at your physical body and how much communication is going on there within itself. Mm-hmm. All the systems are communicating to each other. The electrical impulses are communicating to each other. Your body, your heart's communicating to beat. Your lungs are communicating to expand and contract. So a lot of that is so effortless and unconscious. And what I notice is that communication happens on so many different levels, and it can be pretty complex, and yet it's pretty effortless because you don't really think about your breathing and your blood running through your system.
Unless you have to.
No, unless you have to. That's a different creation of consciousness. So what I'm noticing is that when I shift my perspective to that I am consciousness operating in this world, then things reorganize, and things become really clear, and you start to be able to comprehend on a multitude of levels. And the other thing I notice is as you go along with these shifts is that it may seem, the more clear that you become, the more chaotic the rest of the world may seem. Mm-hmm. It's sort of like as there's greater light coming into the world, then there's, it illuminates the darkness. Mm-hmm. So there's more of that going on all the time, I think. And what's interesting is that, people are becoming much more crystal clear within themselves. Mm-hmm. So it is, there's more conflict going on outside.
Well, I've looked up the definition of communication here, and it says...
I was wondering what you were talking about.
Yeah, the imparting or exchanging of information or news, or the means of connection between people and people or places in particular. So it's the imparting of news doesn't mean anything about how it's received. That's just information is presented. The exchanging of information would seem that there's an openness to what you're receiving and giving back something else, because it's an exchange. And I think that we really have to look at ourselves that we are always sending out. In just being, we're holding a reference point of information. And those of us who pay attention or have that sensitivity, awareness of what that information is to some degree. And we may not know it, but we may recognize it's something that's present. And so information is being exchanged because you're in that, imparting state, whether you want to or not, and you're in that receiving state, whether you want to or not. And you get to decide how you want to experience that. So, we are all one. I'm the absolutely firm believer that as consciousness, we are all one, and that we are individuals sharing this collective experience. And so information is there.
So wait, stop. So we are individuals sharing this collective experience.
Mm-hmm.
We are all one, but we're individuals sharing this collective experience.
Mm-hmm. Is there a question about that?
Well, it's different than how I'm experiencing it as consciousness. I am the greater aspect experiencing this individually.
But we're all in it together.
Well, all of us are consciousness experiencing it. Yeah.
Right, but we're not all separate consciousnesses.
No, we're conscious. We're just consciousness.
Yeah, we're just conscious, and we're all the individualities in that. So communication, it's like we're all, how big's your pie slice, and how many slices are there? It's all the same pie, and each piece is going to be a little unique to itself in what makes it up. But we're all going to say it's a pie, and it's a cherry pie or whatever kind of pie it is. And each bite may taste a little unique if you really had that specialization ability.
Well, don't you think when you're operating as consciousness, everybody could be eating different pie?
They could be eating different pie because that's the way they experience it, but it's all pie. See, that's what's the marvel of it, right? And I don't know that the best explanation of any of that. If you're going to use terms like souls and different ways that religion and spirituality have as their ways of noticing information and making distinctions and differentiations and stuff, it's just consciousness. And
yes.
Then we form into our individuality, specialization. We're a specialized being, each of us, in that sense of, but it's all consciousness.
Yeah, it's interesting because we have our own specializations, and we're coming at it from different biases, and at the essence of it all, it's like the same information, the same message, but with coming out of our different forms, there's the distortions.
Yeah.
And so it's pretty amazing because, if you go right down to the essence of it, the message is that of love, but then what ends up getting spewed out is hate. So it's a very interesting game of opposites here on the planet. And people can have the same intention coming to do something and have completely different methods of expressing it.
So that's communication that's understood or received and then the interpretation is up to the individual as to what they want to do with that. There's, we're talking about how people experience communications with themselves and to their environment, and others are in their environment. I would put the people in that place. Yeah. So it's like I can communicate with the tree, and I'm going to get a different experience than that from my neighbor. Or I might get the same experience, I suppose, to some degree, depending on what the message is, or what I'm open to thinking. It's a tree, so it's going to be different than my neighbor. That's me setting that up, and that's that's a judgment, right? That's me making a distinction about something. When the information is just present, that the tree is so awesome and so beautiful and so enriching in my life, maybe my neighbor's not. Or maybe he is to a certain degree. And that's where I can enjoy what he says, or I have to coach what he says. So the communication is getting affected, right? And how I am in my setup of what life is and who I am and what I want to be and all that stuff, and how I organize my experiences of being will determine how clear that communication really is, or what I'm getting out of that channel of communication. Because I think there's, that's the exchange rate.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you're talking about your theoretical neighbor who it's harder to enjoy your neighbor because of all their annoying traits versus the tree that's just standing there being beautiful. And so I was thinking about this because
now, if the tree falls over though and crashes into my house,
I might have an opinion about the tree.
I might have an opinion, right? So
yeah. And I noticed for myself that, I'm affected by my neighbor when it's got more stuff to do within me. Mm-hmm. It's always more about me than the neighbor.
Well, if I was a person who had been in a disaster and I had an experience of a tree that was negative and that imprinted me so much, that can be like me with my interaction with a stranger or my neighbor, and I had some kind of it's in how we react and how we respond, and we're looking for the response place and and how we're going to communicate. You're a threat. Oh, you're fine. I can feel safe with you. We tend to, because of our experiences, are going to be different. If I'm a city person and I go into the deep forest, I might not feel the comfort that I would get by knowing what my neighbor is in the city, and I know how to deal with that. I don't know what to do in the dark with all these trees, right? It's how we conditionalize how we relate to information. And the more you're in that centered place of yourself as consciousness, you can get past what things look like, and you go to the place of where you can feel dynamics in a different way. And you go, oh, okay, this is all right. It's a tree, and there's lots of them, and which way's north? And, that you find your way. You navigate differently.
So, Janet, if you were coming from that perspective as consciousness or at heart space, how would that change your interaction with all that?
Well, I don't know that there's a difference between reacting and responding for me.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if I'm triggered into a reaction, then that's the human quality that's being punched around. If I'm more in place of responding as consciousness, I go, oh, stop. Okay. Stop the conversation here. Stop that flow of thinking and go, just a minute. What do I notice right now? It's really about being present. And if I expand, the given is that we're all responding from those unconscious places in us. We don't know why. We don't pay attention a lot of times, but we knew, right? By the time we get done with whatever it is, you can go, oh, I didn't listen. And so that's where you rejected the communication, or you conditionalized the communication, or you devalued it to a place where, no, I'm going to just go ahead and do what I want to do. So you're not in that place of responding to what is being present. You're into your old stories. You're into your old patterns.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
That's the difference for me.
I was thinking as we were using the tree as an analogy, is that Byron Katie says she can never call a tree a tree. It was a story she was telling she had a grandchild who was just learning to talk. So, she was walking along with it and she'd go, Grandma, tree. And she's like, I can never call a tree, because she's questioned her thought down to the point of, that there's this tremendous openness and there isn't that kind of definition of a tree. And one of the things I notice when I shift perspective of consciousness, it really neutralizes the labels and my opinions, and because somewhere in your narrative there, I was following along with a story, and I was finding like an opinion about, why people create that this way or create that this way. And then when I shifted to viewing it as consciousness, it's all about creating. It's all about creating. So people, consciousness has so much fun, and I'm talking like you now. Consciousness has so much fun now in this realm. As consciousness, we create being in this realm to experience the differences in physicality. So somebody might be creating, a really uncomfortable, painful experience, and that's just a tremendous creation. That's really capable creation. Look how creative you are that you created your whole war and peace in your personal life, kind of thing. So it's when I can shift my perspective to operating as consciousness, then I have tremendous neutrality and there's neutrality and compassion, but I'm not sympathizing with where people are coming from.
And we want to make sure that everyone is clear that we're not framing that in a context of you created your problem, so there you go.
Yes, right.
It's about that our information and energy and dynamics are everywhere. And that the act of creation as consciousness is not coming with agendas. It's not coming with biases too much in the sense other than as this, I'm going to experience this in this lifetime kind of thing. It's not about doing harm, though harm may be a result. I think I want to be clear with our audience that, tragedies happen, bad things happen, and we respect that. And we're saying that as an act of creative dynamics that each of us on our journey are going to track certain information and communicate clearly. We're more clear about the communication of our creation, I think, that way. There's so much out there. Mm-hmm. And how we want to relate to things.
Yeah, and that's why there's compassion for it, because it's not belittling the pain. It's not saying that that's less than. If anything, that's how incredibly.
It's an honoring of it.
Yes,
but it's coming from a non-attached judgmental space, and
a non-attached judgmental space or non-judgmental space.
Yeah, non-attached, non-judgmental space.
Non-judgmental space, okay.
Yeah, non-judgmental space. Yeah, because that's what grace is. Warmth, support, non-judgment. Mm-hmm. So, and everything is consciousness. And so whether it wears the face of this or a face of that, everything that is part of consciousness. So, it gets that much respect from me. Now, how it plays out and what it is and its intentionality and all that, that's kind of a different place than me. So I can observe all those things.
Yeah. And it's an art rather than a science. It's not a formula. It's dancing with the moment.
Right.
So what I find is I might have great neutrality and compassion and clear communication at one point, and then I might not at another point. And it's about being sort of improvisational and adjusting in the moment is what I would say.
Yeah, it's about being present. We live in our stories, we're in our patterns, and it's using the tools and our awareness as consciousness that we invite those things to show up differently, and so that our creativity is getting used differently, and how we want to relate to things, and what kind of lines of communication or what information would you like to relate to. Now that might be a different place. Just think happy thoughts. Well, it's how you relate to happy thoughts, how you color how you're going to relate to happy thoughts. And does everything become happy? It depends upon what that state of awareness you're holding about it. And some people are going to use that to say, as an act of denial, and we certainly
right, exactly. Happy thoughts are not necessarily
Yeah.
you creating your reality as consciousness.
Yeah.
There's more to say about this, but we have to stop for another commercial break. So I wanted to remind folks that you're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, and I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet. And stay tuned because we're going to be talking more about consciousness and clear communication when we come right back.
Is your soul calling you to do something more meaningful with your life? Do you feel crazy for wanting to quit your secure job? Perhaps you are waiting until you retire to do what you love. Maybe you are too daunted to follow your dream. If any of these match your life, then Joan Newcomb's Purpose and Passion Coaching Program is just for you. In just 12 weeks, you will discover who you essentially are and why you are here. Learn to live as your greater self and navigate with conscious mastery. Go to joan-newcomb.com. That's joan-newcomb.com for all of her coaching programs.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you're dealing with? Janet Barrett is a subtle energy empath. Feeling the energies present in your myths and language, she offers a supportive, non-judgmental viewpoint. Experience new ways to relate to and release the energies in those stories. Receive a $25 discount on your first session. Email Janet for an appointment at janetb@janetandbeyond.com. Come explore with Janet. New possibilities for a joy-filled life.
Would you like a fresh approach to the challenges you are dealing with? Take a journey into your enlightenment with Janet Barrett. Janet is a subtle energies empath accessing the field of potential with warmth, humor, and support. She will help you to hear what your inner voice is saying. She will share with you how to appreciate who you are now and offer you new ways to understand and transform your issues. Reach her at www.janetandbeyond.com. That's janetandbeyond.com. Again, janetandbeyond.com. Transformation is possible. You can enjoy new outcomes in your current experiences. They can happen in the blink of an eye.
You are listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. To reach our program, please send questions and comments to consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. That's consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Now, back to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet.
Welcome back. You're listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet, and we are talking about consciousness and clear communication.
I'm sitting here noticing some disorientation going.
Okay.
That's a clear communication.
Did you take your medication this morning?
Yeah.
Or maybe it's because you took your medication this morning.
Yeah, really. So I want to invite our audience to just allow yourself to be present. And there is no, what perhaps you're feeling is this opening, expansive, invite the grace. The grace is there. Warm support, non-judgment. And that is, you can have an experience and what we would call maybe a reaction when you feel yourself opening up. And it's all right. Just keep us posted. You'll be okay. So sometimes, we're closed down because it feels better, but I think that's pretty much the body talking and not consciousness talking. So.
I don't understand that last sentence. Could you explain it?
Well, sometimes we choose to not be in the place with our stuff. It can show up as denial. It can show up as compartmentalization. It can show up, the emotional terrain is challenging. However, we can be in our reaction about something. And, so stuff gets stored away. And I think that's really prevalent right now is the stored stuff is showing up. And so it's inviting, communication is an invitation for what we all hold within ourselves to find a way to express itself that transforms it, that in the release of it, transformation happens. And so it no longer is acting as these interior points of origin or direction or agenda anymore. And this is an incredible time for this to be in shift. So,
yeah. I agree with you in that it's not, so when you're experiencing a detachment, or when I am clear as consciousness and pain disappears, I'm not in denial about pain. I'm just experiencing reality from a more expanded level. But what we are noticing in the world today is people coming out of denial, things coming into the light, and, stuff bubbling to the surface, people getting triggered, all those sorts of things. And when you experience it as consciousness, it really is this amazing unfolding. And as I'm describing this to you, it reminds me of the kind of things that you see on, nature shows where they do time lapse. Mm-hmm. Where you see something that's starts to, you take a caterpillar turning into a butterfly, or you take something starting to molt, or one of those little flowers, blossoming and all it's very accelerated, but all this stuff is coming off. And at first it looks really chaotic and it looks really ugly, and then it turns into something beautiful. And when you're experiencing all of this unfolding as consciousness, you can see the beauty in it, even as it sounds really ugly.
Well, and just the moment that we have, our sense of time can be a trap. As consciousness, there is no time or space. So in watching that beautiful description, of the time speed photography and time-lapse photography, and things, get condensed down, we can take a lifetime to explore something and to make a movement in it. And if you take the judgment out of that, if you allow it to just be information with no attachment to it, then it can just go. It can just be different because the state has changed about it. And so there's all different ways to have our experience of process of what is inside. So we don't judge any of that. We just go, well, if that could be different right in this moment, what would that be like? And then you open that invitation, because grace is always present. Grace is always present. Yes.
And continuing on, this energy of grace can go out with you throughout the rest of your day and your week. And if you want to go deeper with us, you can also connect with us beyond this show. The website is consciousconversationswithjoanandjanet.com, and there you can listen to all of our podcasts. You can read our blogs. Janet puts hers out on Mondays, and I put mine out on Fridays. You can see about going to our meetups. If you're in Portland, Janet does hers in the evening on Tuesdays and on Thursday afternoons in her lovely home in Portland. You can also visit me. I'm in Redmond this weekend on Sunday, October 29th. I'm in Seattle on November 5th, and I'm in Tacoma on November 12th. And you can also find out more about our sessions. And we are on Facebook, and I'm pretty certain the Facebook links are all on our Conscious Conversations with joanandjanet.com. And you can also follow us on Twitter. I'm hoping that our Twitter links are on there as well. You can subscribe to us on YouTube. I'm not 100% certain if our YouTubes are also on our website. I should check that after this. But I'm on YouTube and I'm on our website. So that's our nice one-stop shop there, is Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet, to connect with us beyond the show.
I think that's another thing we need to mention is, we think we're communicating. We think it's done, and it's not. Right? You find out later that, oh, didn't you get my message? Did you get my email? And it's like, okay, so you're presuming, right? Because you were clear in your moment, and it just went wherever it went, right? So it's an interesting thing. So.
Right. Again, communication is an art, not a science.
Definitely an art.
Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us here today or whenever it is, because there is no time or space as consciousness. So whenever you are actually listening to this, you're actually creating this in the moment with us now. Yeah. So we appreciate your contribution to our morphic field.
Yeah, we look to hold this show in a state of awareness. So that means when you tap into it, that's active, it's not something that has a time or space sense to it. It's just, there it is. So.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say we hold these truths to be self-evident.
Oh, do we? Yes, I suppose we do, don't we? Some of us run that way anyway.
Right. And that would be a perfect time to launch into something from Hamilton, but I actually don't know any of those songs.
Okay.
All right. Well, you've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. I'm your host, Joan, along here with Janet, and we thank you so much for joining us as consciousness expressing and evolving.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy the day.
Tune in next week, same time, same channels.
You've been listening to Conscious Conversations with Joan and Janet. And thanks so much for helping to co-create the show, no matter if you're listening live or on demand. You energetically contribute to our collective experience. Joan and Janet love to hear from you and invite you to email your comments and ideas for them to explore each week. Contact them at consciouswithjoanandjanet@gmail.com. Tune in next week for another great show, and until then, keep enjoying this wonderful adventure we call life.